Srimad Bhagavatam, second canto, first line. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Page 21, text 12, chapter 1, the first step in God realization. Kim pramattasya babhuhi.
Kim pramattasya babhuhi.
Parokshayar hayanayar iha.
Parokshayar hayanayar iha.
Param muhurtam viditam.
Param muhurtam viditam.
Katate shreyase yataha.
Katate shreyase yataha.
What is the value of a prolonged life which is wasted, inexperienced by years in this world? Better a moment of full consciousness, because that gives one a start in searching after his supreme interest.
Katvango nama rajashir.
Katvango nama rajashir.
Natveyatam mihayusha.
Natveyatam mihayusha.
Urtat sarvamutsrija.
Urtat sarvamutsrija.
Katavannavayam hari.
Katavannavayam hari.
The saintly king Maharaj Katvang, after being informed that the duration of his life would be only a moment more, at once got himself freed from all material activities and took shelter of the supreme safety and personality of God.
Tadhapi etarhi gardravya.
Tadhapi etarhi gardravya.
Shaptaham jivita vadivi.
Shaptaham jivita vadivi.
Upakalpaya tat sarvam.
Upakalpaya tat sarvam.
Avat yat samparayikam.
Avat yat samparayikam.
Maharaj Parikshit, now your duration of life is limited to 7 more days. So during this time you can perform all those rituals which are needed for the best purpose of your next life.
Antakale tu purusha.
Antakale tu purusha.
Agate kata shadvasha.
Agate kata shadvasha.
Chindyada shanga shastrena.
Chindyada shanga shastrena.
Vriham dehenu ye chatam.
Vriham dehenu ye chatam.
At the last stage of one's life, one should be bold enough not to become afraid of death. But he must cut off all attachment to the material body and everything pertaining to it, all desires thereof.
Vrihat pravrajito dira.
Vrihat pravrajito dira.
Punyatirtha jalapluta.
Punyatirtha jalapluta.
Sucho vivikta ashino.
Sucho vivikta ashino.
Vidivat kalpita shane.
Vidivat kalpita shane.
One should leave home and practice self-control. In a sacred place, he should bathe regularly and sit down in a lonely place, duly sanctified.
Abhyashen manasha shudham.
Abhyashen manasha shudham.
Rivrid brahmaksharam padam.
Rivrid brahmaksharam padam.
Manho yachev yajaj jitasha shvasho.
Manho yajaj jitasha shvasho.
Brahma bijam avishmaram.
Brahma bijam avishmaram.
After sitting in the above manner, making the mind remember the 3 transcendental letters A, U, M, and by regulating the breathing process, control the mind so as not to forget the transcendental C.
Niyachet vyeshavyekshan.
Niyachet vyeshavyekshan.
Manashabudisharati.
Manashabudisharati.
Manakarma virakshiptam.
Manakarma virakshiptam.
Shubharte darayaddiya.
Shubharte darayaddiya.
Gradually, as the mind becomes progressively spiritualized, withdraw it from sense activities, and by intelligence, the senses will be controlled. The mind, being too much absorbed in material activities, can be engaged in the service of the personality of Godhead, become fixed in full transcendental consciousness.
Tatraikavayam dhyayat avyuchinena cetasha mano nirvishayam yuktva tata kinchana nasmarit padam tat paramam Vishnu mano yatra prasidate.
Thereafter you should meditate upon the limbs of Vishnu one after another, without being deviated from the conception of the complete body. And thus the mind becomes free from all sense objects. There should be no other thing to be thought upon. Because the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, is the ultimate truth, the mind becomes completely reconciled to Him only.
Rajastamobhyam akshiptam vimudam mana atmana yachatdaranaya dhiro antiyatat kritam malam.
Always agitated by the passionate modes of material nature and bewildered by the ignorant modes of nature. But one can rectify such conceptions by the relation of Vishnu and thus become pacified by cleansing the dirty things created by them.
Yashyam sandaryamanayam yogino bhakti lakshana ashusham padyate yoga ashrayam badramikshata.
O King, by this system of remembrance and by being fixed in the habit of seeing the all-good personal conception of the Lord, one can very soon attain devotional service of the Lord under His direct shelter.
So, now to remember what we were reading last time, the saintly king Maharaj Parikshit has been cursed. Maharaj Parikshit is the grandson of the Pandavas. He's the only remaining descendant of the great Pandavas, Arjuna and his brothers. And he is the king of the world. And he has been cursed to die in 7 days. Therefore he has sat down on the bank of the Ganges to simply utilize the end of his life for becoming perfectly situated at the time of death. And at that time, because he's such a great Maha great devotee of the Lord, so many famous personalities from the spiritual realms have come to witness the last 7 days of Maharaj Parikshit's life. And Maharaj Parikshit has been advised by them in so many different methods. But at the last moment, the son of Srila Vyasadeva, the literary incarnation of Godhead, Srila Vyasadeva is an incarnation of Krishna. He's the one who compiled all of the Vedic scriptures in writing, not only Bhagavad Gita, but Srimad Bhagavatam, Rama Sutras, so many. All the Vedas, Upanishads, were all compiled by Vyasadeva. His son, Sukadeva Goswami, who was in the womb of his mother for 16 years, and who heard his father, Vyasadeva, recite this Bhagavatam, he has come on the scene. And although he was naked and seemed to be even mad to the inhabitants nearby, and although he was very young, at least in terms of age materially, but he was chosen to be the chief speaker, and he was given the most elevated seat of the Vyasasana. And now he is beginning to speak to the king Parikshit Maharaj. What is the duty? What is the primary duty of life, and what should one do at the end of one's life? So the first point now that we're reading today is that he says in text 12, what is the value of a prolonged life which is wasted, inexperienced by years in this world? Better a moment of full consciousness because that gives one a start in searching after his supreme interest. So, there's another mention in Srimad Bhagavatam, that what is the use of living for hundreds of years? A tree is living for hundreds of years. In fact, we have experienced that, I think it is in the Mir forest, the redwoods are living for up to 5,000 years. And what human being nowadays can hope to live 5,000 years? No. But what is the use even if one could, if one's consciousness is no better than that of a tree? So what is the use of simply a long life with so many varied kinds of experiences, if the end result is simply to entangle one deeper and deeper into this material world? Practically, we find that all of the experiences, all of the experiences in this world have simply entangled us deeper and deeper into forgetfulness of our relationship with God. So Maharaj Pariksit only has 7 days more to live, and here we find that Sukadeva Goswami is encouraging him, even if you have only 7 days to live, don't despair. Because one moment of Krishna consciousness, or one moment of God consciousness, is sufficient to perfect one's life. This is also mentioned in other parts of the Bhagavatam, that even if one performs so many kinds of austerities, penances, sacrifices, but fails to develop love for Krishna, it's simply a waste of time. However, even if one neglects all his other duties but develops Krishna consciousness, then his life is considered successful. Then in another part of Bhagavad Gita it's mentioned that yes, whatever is done, Krishna says to Arjuna, there is no loss for one. No matter what he does, if it's done in Krishna consciousness, there is no loss. Actually, sometimes it's found that in business, if the business is not completely successful, then the business is said to be a failure. But in Krishna consciousness, even 1% done in Krishna consciousness, there's no loss. So one should not feel despair that, oh, I'm not very intelligent, or oh, I've got so many disadvantages, I've taken up this movement very late, or so many things you may feel. But one should not despair, because here Sukadeva Goswami is telling Maharaj Pariksit, there's no loss. Even one little act done in Krishna consciousness is your permanent gain, permanently banked. This is a bank account which can never be lost. And in your next lifetime, whatever you've accomplished in this lifetime in Krishna consciousness will carry over to you in your next lifetime, and you'll begin from that point. So Maharaj Pariksit is being encouraged here not to despair. Yes.
Next verse. The saintly king Maharaj Kadvanga, after being informed that the duration of his life would be only a moment more, at once got himself freed from all material activities and took shelter of the supreme safety, the personality of Godhead. Prabhupada says in the purport that Maharaj Kadvanga is mentioned herein as the saintly king, because even within the responsibility of the state management, he was not at all forgetful of the prime duty of life. Such was the case with other Rajarshis, saintly kings, like Maharaj Yudhisthira and Maharaj Pariksit. They were all exemplary personalities on account of their being alert in discharging their prime duty. Maharaj Kadvanga was invited by the demigods and the higher planets to fight demons, and as a king he fought the battles to the full satisfaction of the demigods. The demigods, being fully satisfied with him, wanted to give him some benediction for material enjoyment. But Maharaj Kadvanga, being very much alert to his prime duty, inquired from the demigods about his remaining duration of life. This means that he was not as anxious to accumulate some material benediction from the demigods as he was to prepare himself for the next life. He was, however, informed by the demigods that his life would last only a moment longer. The king at once left the heavenly kingdom, which is always full of material enjoyment of the highest standard, and coming down on this earth, took ultimate shelter of the all-safe personality of Godhead. He was successful in his great attempt and got liberation. This attempt, even for a moment, by the saintly king was successful because he was alert to his prime duty. Maharaj Pariksit was thus encouraged by the great Sukadeva Goswami Even though he had only 7 days left in his life to execute the prime duty of hearing the glories of the Lord in the form of Srimad Bhagavatam. By the will of the Lord, Maharaj Pariksit instantly met the great Sukadeva Goswami, and the great treasure of spiritual success left by him is nicely mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam.
Next verse. Maharaj Pariksit, now your duration of life is limited to 7 more days. So during this time you can perform all those rituals which are needed for the best purpose of your next life. So those rituals are to hear, chant, and glorify the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The primary ritual, actually the only required ritual to be performed in this lifetime, is to hear, chant, and glorify the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And all other rituals are simply extra, surplus, but this is the essential ritual. If one simply utilizes his life for hearing the message of Godhead, the message of Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, if one simply utilizes his time for chanting the glories of the Lord's name and reciting Bhagavatam and other transcendental literatures about Krishna, and remembering, if one always remembers the Supreme Personality of Godhead, how his appearing, his activities and his disappearance, then one is guaranteed to go back to Godhead. So Maharaj Pariksit doesn't have to do anything else now. At the last point of his life, he's not worried what's happening with my family, what's happening with my kingdom, what's happening with my business. He's not concerned for any of these things. He's simply going to perform the essential duty. So actually, Maharaj Pariksit got notice of 7 days. You're going to die in 7 days. But we may not be so fortunate. Pariksit Maharaj was the greatest devotee of the Lord, but what is our case going to be? We're not such great devotees of the Lord. There's no telling when that death may come to us. Therefore, we have to always be performing the primary duty, because at any moment death may come. It's not that you can go on with all of your mundane activities, even for 1 second. It's not that you can allow your mind to consider mundane thoughts, because at any moment you may die. At any moment a car may hit you, see, or anything can happen which can kill you. Therefore, you have to be constantly 24 hours engaged in hearing, chanting, and remembering the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If you don't do this, then you may miss the opportunity of this human form of life. And this is the example being given by Pariksit Maharaj. Yes?
There's a statement made earlier in the Bhagavatam about chanting unconsciously. If, let's say you're walking on the street, and you're chanting unconsciously, and you're hit by a car, you die. Do you obtain liberation because of chanting, not paying attention?
Well, it's by the grace of Krishna what happens. That's, in other words, Prabhupada would say, the actual point is this: why are you chanting unconsciously?
He means unattainable.
Well, the degree to which you develop love of Godhead is the degree to which you go back to Godhead. In other words, if you're chanting unattainably, then you're not a pure devotee, so you're not going to go back to Godhead. This is not such a cheap thing, going back to Godhead. You can't fake this. You have to become 100% unalloyed. The spiritual world is completely pure. There's no material tinge at all. So if you're chanting offensively or without concentration, you're not unalloyed devotee. So how you can go back to God? It's not possible. This has to be, you'll go in your next lifetime, you see, it's mentioned. Anyway, there's a verse, in the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, verses 41 and 42, that the unsuccessful yogi in his next lifetime takes birth, we mentioned this in our test, in a pious family, or in a Suchinam Shrimatam Ge, Hey Joga Rashta Vijayata. That is the verse. One takes birth in a pure family of pious people, or in a wealthy man's family, or in a great transcendentalist family. So that will probably be the fate. If you get hit chanting unconsciously. But why be unconscious? Why not attempt to be conscious?
How about when people complain that we're not doing anything constructive? Just like Sukadeva Goswami, when he was walking through the forest, he was being followed by boys and women, and they were throwing things at him and laughing at him, teasing him as if he was a madman, thinking that he was a useless person in society. Why is it that people can't see the value of simply hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord? They think you have to do something more than that.
Prabhupada says, when the caravan passes, the dogs bark. So such doggish mentality, such people have a doggish mentality. Their simple mental state is that they can only understand materially. They have no purification themselves, therefore they cannot understand what is actually valuable. Just like a man who's uncultured, he may not recognize the value of gold over brass. It could be like that. He may not be able not to tell what is gold, what is a diamond. He may accept broken bits of glass instead of taking the diamond. So, fools who are completely materially addicted, whose senses are impure, who are completely entangled in lust, envy, greed, they cannot understand the benefit of chanting Hare Krishna mantra. Therefore, for such persons, we have to just go on chanting. We don't speak the philosophy, because they won't understand what the benefit of this is. But actually, simply by hearing, they're being benefited. One has to become purified in order to appreciate Krishna. Krishna and Krishna's name are non-different. So just as sometimes it's found that when Krishna appears, there are persons who don't actually realize him to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Similarly, now Krishna is appearing in the form of his name, and the atheists again are failing to realize that here is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So these persons are atheists and demons. They're to be understood as atheists and demons.
Text 15. At the last stage of one's life, one should be bold enough not to become afraid of death, but he must cut off all attachment to the material body and everything pertaining to it and all desires thereof. Prabhupada says in the purport, as one changes an old garment, so the individual living being also changes his body. And this change of body is called death. Death is therefore a process of changing the body at the end of the duration of the present life. An intelligent person must be prepared for this and must try to have the best type of body in the next life. The best type of body is a spiritual body, which is obtained by those who go back to the kingdom of God, into the realm of Brahman. In the second chapter of this canto, this matter will be broadly discussed. But in as far as the change of body is concerned, one must prepare now for the next life. Foolish people attach more importance to the present temporary life, and thus the foolish leaders make appeals to the body and the bodily relations. The bodily relations not only extend to this body, but also to the family members, wife, children, society, country, and so many other things which end at the end of life. After death, one forgets everything about the present bodily relations. We have a little experience of this at night when we go to sleep. While sleeping, we forget everything about this body and the bodily relations. Although this forgetfulness is a temporary situation for only a few hours, death is nothing but sleeping for a few months in order to develop another body, a term of bodily engagement, which we are awarded by the law of nature according to our aspiration. Therefore, one has only to change the aspiration during the course of this present body, and for this there is a need of training in the current duration of human life. This training can be begun at any stage of life, or even a few seconds before death, but the usual procedure is for one to get the training from very early life. So this is the idea that one has to cut off the feeling, the willing. Then the most gross manifestation, of course, is the senses, and beyond the senses are the sense objects. So the soul is absorbed by his consciousness in all these outward manifestations of this material world, beginning from the subtle to the gross. He identifies himself with these thinking, feeling, willing, in-going, outgoing breaths, and eating process, digestion process, growing process, dying process, all these different things. So this is what is taking up the consciousness of the soul. So one has to wind up his consciousness Just as the king Maharaj Parikshit, not only was he responsible for his own body, but he was responsible for the body of the entire kingdom. That means he was thinking how the rains would come at the proper times, how the citizens would become free from all mental and physical anxieties. Not only was he thinking of his own body, but of the body of the entire kingdom. And yet he was able to detach himself at the time of death from all these responsibilities. He was able to wind up his consciousness from these outward manifestations and simply fix it on the glories of the Lord. This is not an easy thing to do. If it's difficult to keep your consciousness off your own senses and sense objects and the attraction thereof, imagine how difficult it was for Maharaj Parikshit to withdraw his mind from the responsibility of the whole kingdom. See? Very difficult. Just like Jesus Christ said, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man to enter into the kingdom of God. Because his mind is so much absorbed in his profit calculation and his business and responsibilities that how can he withdraw it to the glories of the Lord? You see? But Maharaj Parikshit, although he was greater than any rich man, more powerful, he was the king of the world, and yet he was able to withdraw his mind from all that responsibility, material responsibility, and simply concentrate on the Lord. So this is possible if one is practiced from the very beginning of life, like Maharaj Parikshit was. From the very beginning of his childhood, he was worshipping the deity of Krishna. He was born in a family of pure devotees. The pure devotee mother and father gave him the deity of Radha and Krishna, and he was worshipping, offering flowers, offering garlands, offering incense. So from the very beginning of his life, he knew how to concentrate his mind on the form, name, paraphernalia, activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is never forgotten if one is trained from the beginning of life. He doesn't forget it. And therefore, even though he was a responsible king, he was able to remember the prime duty of life. He was alert, as it says here, in purport. He was alert to the prime duty of life, and therefore, when the opportunity came, he took it. You see, fully took it. He had no other consideration that kept him from taking advantage of the great opportunity of knowing that he would die within 7 days. He didn't think like foolish people in the hospital think when they know they're going to die, oh, please send for my mother. Oh, please send for my father. Please, doctor, help me live a few moments longer so I can finish up my last deal. He didn't think like the fool man. You see, he took advantage because from his very childhood he was trained to be alert in the matter of self-realization.
What is the position or the power of the soul at the present moment in redrawing external manifestations of mind and intelligence?
The soul has no power in the material world because he's surrendered himself to matter. However, in the human form of life, the soul's consciousness can be revived by training. That's why it's mentioned. The human form of life is meant for training for the next life. You see, an animal you can't train for the next life. Therefore, he's under the stringent laws of nature. It's already guaranteed what the animal's next life is going to be. He can't do anything to change it, bad or better. See, by instinct he acts, and he doesn't break the laws of nature. Therefore, automatically he's elevated. You see? But the human being, because he's been given higher intelligence, more facility, there must be training. Otherwise he's worse than an animal. See? The animal won't break the laws of nature, but the human being can break the law of nature. You see? You won't see animals killing their children within their womb. You see? But the animal women of this age, they take this birth control pill and they kill their own children in their womb. They're worse than animals. You see? So, human life has to be cultured from the beginning. Otherwise they'll invent, do you think birth control is just the beginning of what the demons will invent? You see? It's just the beginning. As the laws become more and more liberal, they'll invent hundreds of demonic things. You see? Soon they'll be eating the fetuses that they abort. You see, it'll be considered a great delicacy in restaurants to eat an aborted fetus. You'll see how the rascals progress. You see? This is rascal progress. Yeah.
Next verse. One should leave home and practice self-control. In a sacred place he should bathe regularly and sit down in a lonely place, duly sanctified. So the system of Varnashram Dharma provides that a man, after his children should grow up, he may be free to leave home, leaving his wife in the care of the eldest son. And he can leave his home to devote himself entirely to spiritual realization. This is because family life is described as a dark well. Actually, it's a fact, because it is bad enough that one identifies himself with his body, but family life simply means extended bodily identification. One not only identifies himself with his body, but identifies himself also with his wife's body, his children's bodies, and in this way, being completely illusioned by so many bodily identifications, the conditioned soul is hardly able to think of himself as something spiritual. Therefore, it's advised that in the end of one's life, say at the time of about 50 years of age, a householder or a married man should leave home, and he should go to a secluded place and practice self-control. Practicing self-control means to, first of all, control the mind and the senses. And as we learned from Bhagavad Gita, the mind is controlled when it meditates on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And similarly, the senses are controlled when they're engaged in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So far as a sacred place mentioned, generally sacred place means a place where there's a sacred river. In India especially, we find so many sacred rivers. So it's advised that a person, when he leaves home, should reside in some place where there's a sacred river. You'll find in India all of the holy places are located on a sacred river. Just like Prayag or Allahabad is located on the Ganges and Jamuna and Saraswati rivers. Vrindavan is located on the Jamuna River. Hastinapur is located on the Jamuna River. Mayapur is located on the Ganges. Hardwar and Rishikesh are located on the Ganges. Practically every sacred place in India is flowing by a river, a sacred river. Of course, for us who are in America, one may ask the question, then what is the hope? We don't have the Ganges or the Saraswati or the Jamuna flowing by. We only have the Pacific Ocean or something of this kind, Atlantic Ocean. But actually, sacred place can be extended to be more than just a place where a sacred river flows. The actual meaning of sacred is that place where Krishna is being worshipped, or God is being worshipped. What makes the Ganges and the Jamuna sacred is that they have touched the body of the Lord. So actually, sacred means wherever Krishna is present, or wherever anything which has touched Krishna is present. Therefore, in our temples throughout the world, they are as sacred as any place in the Ganges or the Jamuna, providing we keep them pure. A temple is not necessarily always sacred. It can be made contaminated. Actually, sacred places even become contaminated, and therefore they have to constantly be visited by pure devotees of the Lord. Similarly, our temples can become contaminated if our consciousness is not kept pure Krishna consciousness. But if we keep ourselves very spiritually pure and sound, then the temples will be so nice that anyone who visits them will immediately be able to bathe, not only bodily but spiritually. It's advised here that one should bathe regularly. And bathe regularly is part of the Brahminical standard of living, just as we ourselves bathe as far as possible at least 3 times in a day. We bathe early in the morning at about 4 in the morning when we wake up. Then we bathe once again at about noontime, and we should bathe again in the afternoon, late afternoon. If this is not possible, at least twice in a day we should bathe. And internally we should bathe by constantly chanting the Hare Krishna Maha mantra. One should sit down in a lonely place duly sanctified. Lonely place duly sanctified doesn't necessarily mean alone. Just as Sukadev goes, just as Parikshit Maharaj, he's sitting in a lonely place. Lonely place has to be taken to mean that place where only spiritual activities are going on, not where any material activities are going on. So this is the process by which one can become purified, as exemplified by Parikshit Maharaj.
After sitting in the above manner, make the mind remember the 3 transcendental letters Om, and by regulating the breathing process, control the mind so as not to forget the transcendental seed. Prabhupada says Omkara, or the pranava, is the seed of transcendental realization, and it is composed of 3 transcendental letters, A-U-M. By its chanting, by the mind, in conjunction with the breathing process, which is the transcendental but mechanical way of getting into trance, as devised by the experience of great mystics, one is able to bring the mind which is materially absorbed under control. This is a way of changing the habit of the mind. The mind is not to be killed. Mind or desire cannot be stopped, but to develop a desire to function for spiritual realization, the quality of engagement by the mind has to be changed. The mind is the pivot of the active sense organs, and as such, if the quality of thinking, feeling, and willing is changed, naturally the quality of actions by the instrumental senses will also change. Omkara is the seed of all transcendental sound, and it is the transcendental sound only which can bring about the desired change of the mind and the senses. Even a mentally deranged man can be cured by treatment of transcendental sound. In the Bhagavad Gita, the pranava, or Omkara, has been accepted as the direct literal representation of the Supreme Absolute Truth. One who is not able to chant directly the holy name of the Lord, as recommended above, can easily chant the pranava, or Omkara. This Omkara is a note of address, such as, O my Lord, just as Om Hari Om means, O my Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As we have explained before, the Lord's holy name is identical with the Lord himself, so also is Omkara. But persons who are unable to realize the transcendental personal form or name of the Lord on account of their imperfect senses, in other words, the neophytes, are trained to the practice of self-realization by the mechanical process of regulating the breathing function and simultaneously repeating the pranava, Omkara, within the mind. As we have several times experienced, since the transcendental name, form, attributes, pastimes, etc. of the personality of Godhead are impossible to be understood by the present material senses, it is necessary that though the mind, the center of the sensual activities, through the mind, the center of the sensual activities, such transcendental realization be set into motion. The devotees, however, directly fix their minds on the person of the Absolute Truth. But one who is unable to accommodate such personal features of the Absolute is disciplined in that impersonality to train the mind to make further progress.
Next verse. Gradually as the mind becomes progressively spiritualized, withdrawn from sense activities, and by intelligence the senses will be controlled. The mind, being too much absorbed in material activities, can be engaged in the service of the personality of Godhead and become fixed in full transcendental consciousness. So here we have Sukadeva Goswami is explaining the process for meditating at the time of death. First thing he mentions is sit down in a lonely place. Generally that means on a deer skin with kusa grass, and to vibrate the sacred syllable Om, Omkar. But actually this process is called the mystic process of yoga. This is called the mystic process of yoga, and it includes pranayam, so many asanas, but this process is not recommended in Bhagavad Gita. I don't think we should become distracted. The lights will be turned on and try to concentrate on the subject. This process has already been described in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna has explained the Ashtanga Yoga system, and Arjuna has rejected it as impossible. So also here, first of all, Sukadeva Goswami is explaining this system of going to a lonely place, sitting down, vibrating the syllable Om, but that's not going to happen to any of us. We're not going to do this system. Factually, it's not possible because not everyone is even in the renounced sort of life. It says you have to give up all sex life. You have to leave your family, become completely celibate. So many things. So the next point he mentions that you should engage after the mind is controlled. You engage your mind in the service of the personality of Godhead and become fixed in full transcendental consciousness. This is the process of Krishna consciousness. It's confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita in the 6th chapter. At that same chapter where Krishna mentions the Ashtanga Yoga system and Arjuna rejects it, Krishna then says, then think of me. He says, Yoginam api sarvesha matkatinantaratma. That of all yogis, he who engages in thinking of me, he is considered to be the highest and most perfect of all. So here again we find Krishna is again, Sukadeva Goswami is again emphasizing this point, that simply try to use your mind for always thinking of Krishna. Whatever you see in this world, see it as a representation of Krishna. If you see the hills, think of it as the stacks of bones of Krishna. If you see the ocean, you think of it as
Waste.
Waste of Krishna. In this way, everything that you see as some part of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And anytime you see Krishna's energies working, try to see how his energies are working. If you see someone acting in a foolish way, try to see how he's being influenced by the modes of nature. And in every way, try to become Krishna conscious. Somehow or other, remember the instruction of Krishna. This is now being advised by Sri Chaitanya Swami.
In order for Om to work properly, does one need to have that invested by a pure devotee, as one needs to have a Hare Krishna Maha mantra?
Any system, in order to work, has to be invested ultimately by one who's authorized. No, there is no way to approach God alone. One must go through Guru. That is the system. One must get instructed by a Guru in any process of God realization. Never can approach that. Just as you can never approach the president directly, you must go through his authorized representative, the secretary, someone, and seek appointment. By getting the favor of the secretary, one may get to see the president. By getting the favor of the pure devotee, by being instructed properly, you can approach God.
Thereafter you should meditate upon the limbs of Vishnu one after another, without being deviated from the conception of the complete body, and thus the mind becomes free from all sense objects. There should be no other thing to be thought upon. Because the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu is the ultimate truth, the mind becomes completely reconciled to Him only. In other words, the form of the Lord is the only thing that can satisfy the desire of the mind. The mind is seeking happiness, seeking perfection, and its instruments are the senses, you see. Therefore, the senses should be used to meditate upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and this will satisfy the mind. As long as we use the senses by imperfect intelligence to try to satisfy the mind by engaging with sense objects, the mind will remain dissatisfied, remain saturated, and the search will continue. But as soon as we find out the desirable object, the real desirable object that we're looking for, the mind becomes satisfied and we're self-situated. There's no longer any search. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that when we have actually attained this truth, we'll become indifferent that all that has been heard and all that is to be heard. You see? We'll become indifferent to this whole manifestation, you see, in all its varieties, because we'll see it all as simply part of the body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead.